Hey everybody. Um, Here's a mess. Um, okay, so it's late on a Wednesday night, and I'm going to do a little bit of a semi-rant. If you're out there, hit the chat, say hi. Um, so I was watching TikTok, which I'm doing way too much these days, but and I saw this video of so apparently there's a show on one of the streaming sites like Hulu or something called Couples Therapy. And then the TikTok posters, I think it's a couple, and they were sort of giving their analysis of what they saw going on with this couple who's in couples therapy. And I'm going to do a little FE sort of like, don't hate me kind of thing to start off with. And the people who posted this, they seem cool. They seem like they mean well. I'm really not trying to bag on them too much, but I do want to sort of use it as an opportunity to make a point about MBTI and all the stuff that's associated with it. Personality types, whatever you want to categorize it as. So let me get into the background. So they're watching this clip of a couple who's in couples therapy on this show. And honestly, I forget the details, but the details don't really matter. The bigger point is the point I'm trying to make. Where the couple was sort of just it was a husband and wife, and the wife was describing something as being, some sort of event or some sort of occurrence happened, and she described it as devastating. And the husband sort of locked into that word, devastating, and was like, well, what do you mean by devastating? Was it really devastating? And was just fixated on, whether or not whatever happened sort of rose to the level of devastating, right? Because devastating is a pretty strong word. And I think that's what his point was, right? And it was kind of clear to me, maybe not everybody, but it was clear to me that this guy was probably like an INTP, maybe an ISTP, but most likely like lead introverted thinking, maybe like an ENTP, ESTP type, where it was second, but very, very heavy TI, right? And like all TI users, they sort of get fixated on definitions, right? Like if you're going to say devastating, do you really mean devastating, or or are we talking something at that level, or maybe something at another level? Because it's just lead TI. It's just lead TI. They get fixated on definitions, right? Um, and this guy was clearly getting fixated on the definition of devastated or whatever, right? So the people who posted it on TikTok, I think, have a book or something that they're selling. And again, I don't want to bag on them. They mean well. They seem like they're cool people. But they themselves sort of got fixated on the fact that this guy got really defensive about the word choice. And under their model, whatever their model is, they have this sort of, for lack of a better word, sort of I don't know, like diagnosis, maybe, or basically just sort of a reading of the person that he has something that they called a wound of judgment. Okay. And maybe this is some model out there I'm not aware of. And it's funny that they use the word judgment because we're talking about TI, which is a judging function. So take that for what it's worth. And they go on with this whole thing about having a wound of judgment and how at some point in his life, somebody was overly critical or something of him, and how this sort of manifests itself as problematic in dealing with these types of people, right? Who have wounds of judgment. And I'm sitting there watching the guy, and I'm just like, no, he's just an INTP or an ISTP or maybe an ENTP or an ESTP. But he's just fixated on the TI part of it, right? And I'm thinking, there's nothing wrong with this guy. I don't know. Maybe there is. I mean, I watched like 30 seconds of it. But in my mind, I'm just like, this is just an INTP, or maybe an ISTP, who's got really heavy introverted thinking. And when you're going to have a conversation with them, and especially if it, sort of gets a little heated and you're in couples therapy and whatnot, you're trying to solve some problem, he's in there in problem solving mode. And in problem solving mode, TI is going to click on. And so TI is going to make him care about definitions. Like, what are we really talking about here? If we're going to try to solve this problem through discourse, not necessarily argument, but just discourse, we have to agree on the defined terms, right? We have to agree on whether or not what I did was really devastating or how you felt about it was devastating, et cetera, et cetera. And that doesn't really, I mean, whether or not it was devastating, I don't know. I mean, that's not really the point. The point is, there's nothing wrong with this guy, as far as I can tell. There's no wound. There's nothing to fix. He's just an INTP or an ISTP. He's got lead introverted thinking or very high introverted thinking. And so it got me thinking about sort of the benefit of understanding psychological types, understanding MBTI, and just understanding that there's nothing, 9 times out of 10, there's nothing wrong with you. And there's nothing wrong with anybody else. It's just understanding their frame of reference. Where are they coming from? And just because they're coming at the problem or the situation or whatever they're dealing with from a different angle, like an introverted thinking angle as opposed to maybe a extroverted feeling angle or whatever, it doesn't mean anything's wrong with them, right? It doesn't mean that there's some wound or deep-seated thing that needs to be fixed. It's just who they are. It's just their personality type. And for those of you out there who are, level 10 MBTI experts all the way down to level 1, just understand that understanding personality types, and especially your own personality type, but also personality types and others, or psychological types, whatever you want to call it, puts you so much ahead of the curve of just understanding people are different. People are going to approach a particular situation, a particular argument, particular devastating situation differently. And as long as you understand that, you're so much ahead of the curve. You're so much ahead of the curve. And instead of trying to fix people and to try to find some wound in them, just understand that that's just the way they're approaching it. Right? And, we have a lot of fun trying to figure out what the different personality types are and whatnot. You know, is this guy an ISTP or an INFP or whatever? That's all part of the fun. But really, at the heart of it is just understanding that, you know, through biological evolution or intelligent design or however you want to think about it, we all have these different personality types, psychological types, that manifest themselves through caring about, paying attention to, focusing on different things. And there's a need for that, right? We can't all be ISFJs. It would be a great world if we were all ISFJs. Everybody would get along and everybody would do what they're supposed to do. But that's just not the way it works. And through, you know, biology being what it is and needing to diversify among the species to sort of protect itself and to serve different functions in culture, we have these different types. And by understanding, you know, it doesn't really matter if all of us can agree what particular type somebody is, but just the general understanding that you got these TI users, you got these FI users, and this is just the way that they're going to approach the problem. This is just the way they're going to approach the world. Is so much more beneficial than trying to find a fault or a deficit or a problem with everybody, and just, you know, letting the types be the types that they are and understanding that there's a role in that, there's a function in that. And if you happen to be with a type where it just is oil and water and it's just not working, fine, okay? But it's not a problem with you. It's not a problem with them. It's just the type, right? It's just what they feel that they pay attention to and what they feel they need to process given the situation or given what they're trying to solve. Okay. Hey, Winston, sign in the chat. So that's really about it. I'm just ranting because I saw this video. And again, they mean well. They seem like they're very cool people and they got a book to sell. And to them, he was some sort of textbook case of this wound of judgment. Again, I kind of find it funny that they use judgment as the way to describe it because, you know, it's a TI thing. But there's nothing wrong, you know. And so if you get anything out of this channel, and I get that I'm all over the place, but if you get anything out of this channel, just understand that there's nothing wrong with you. It's just your type. And have fun with it. Look up the concept of wabi-sabi in Japanese and the art of appreciating imperfections, right? It'll take you a long way. And I think too much of today's psychology industry is just trying to find things wrong with people. I wish we could kind of go back to the 70s where it was all about self-actualization and just, you know, trying to take what you have and improve it rather than today's sort of applied psychology of just trying to find things that are wrong with everybody. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just evolution. It's just, we're all just different types. And yeah, there are some, you know, clinical deficits, but statistically speaking, you can't have 20% or 30% of the population with ADHD or anxiety or depression. Because just statistically speaking, like it's a normal distribution. And only 5% would be outside of the norm, right? And so if you got some sort of ADHD or whatever you know, the cognitive deficit du jour is, if you have 15 to 20% of the population with it, it's not a deficit. It's just where you are on the normal bell curve, right? So that's the thing that grinds my gears about today's applied psychology. So that's my rant. Take it for what it's worth. Leave me a comment if you agree, if you disagree. But if you're really into the psychological type and you just sort of understand that people are different and they're framing things differently based off of where their attention goes when they're trying to solve a problem, you're light years ahead of everybody else out there trying to find problems with everybody, trying to find wounds. So, all right. I appreciate you listening to my rant. I'll have something more informed later, another day. Have a good night. Hope everybody's doing well out there. Have fun.